I arrived early, not because I was eager, but because it's what I've always done quiet. On time. Out of the way. The venue was beautiful. Exactly what Tessa had always dreamed of. White garden chairs. Soft music floating through the trees. Petals scattered along the aisle like someone had scripted it all in pastel. I wore a pale blue dress she once said brought out my eyes. That was years ago. But I remembered. I kept my hair neat, added a touch of lipstick, and carried myself the way a mother is supposed to when she's proud. No one greeted me when I walked in. I passed groups of guests chatting with cocktails, hugging each other with the warmth that comes from knowing your place in a celebration. I kept moving. I told myself it was nerves, or timing, or noise. The photographer called for family. His voice rose above the music. Cheerful. Efficient. Can we get the immediate family? Please, brideside. Front and center. I straightened my shoulders. Tessa turned, smiling brightly as she waved people in her father, his new wife, her husband's parents, her bridesmaids. I hovered a few steps back, waiting for her to notice me, waiting for the small hand gesture, the come here. Mom. She never looked my way. Instead, she said lightly, with a small laugh, only the important ones in front. The photographer chuckled, repositioning someone. Her stepmother adjusted her earrings and moved in closer. I stayed where I was, unsure whether I should smile or pretend not to have heard. So I did both. I smiled, and I didn't move. When the shutter clicked, I was half hidden behind a tall potted fern, not quite in the photo, not quite out of it. Tessa didn't turn around. They moved on quickly to the next setup. Champagne was passed around. Someone called out for group shots with the bridal party. I stepped aside, invisible in motion, just ahead. I saw the table with name badges waiting. The table with the name badges was draped in ivory linen. A young woman in a headset barely glanced up before handing me a plain white card. No ribbon, no seat assignment, just general guest in blocky print. And under that, smaller, no meal provided. I tucked it into my purse without a word. I used to imagine moments like this would feel different, warming, like a reward, but weddings are mirrors. And that card felt like a summary. Raising Tessa had meant skipping every shortcut. I worked 3 jobs when she was little school secretary in the morning, waitressing evenings, and weekend shifts at the library shelving returns. There were winters when the pipes threatened to freeze and the thermostat never clicked past 60. Once, when she made the competitive dance team, I canceled my health insurance to cover the uniform fees. I smiled through it, told her I felt fine. That was the same year I sold my engagement ring to pay for a semester of college quietly, without telling her. Because she never asked how things were paid for, she just danced. She just went. I remember the feel of that velvet box, sitting alone in the car after the pawn shop, breathing like I'd just handed over a part of myself no one would ever want back. This morning, I placed a white envelope on the edge of the gift table. Inside was a check for $9,500. A quiet gift for their honeymoon. I didn't write a note. I didn't want to be thanked. I just wanted to be seen. But maybe I misunderstood how visibility worked in this family. I stepped into the reception hall and looked for my name on the chart. The woman at the reception check-in didn't meet my eyes when I gave my name. She reached down into a tray with practiced indifference and pulled out a badge. No smile, no welcome, just the soft sound of plastic being lifted. It was stark white, laminated, and printed in bold. Black letters, general guest, no meal provided. I stared at it longer than I should have, blinking once, then tucking it into my purse like it didn't sting. Around me, the air buzzed with laughter and champagne flutes. I stepped aside to let the couple behind me through. They were handed elegant envelopes sealed with gold wax stamps. The woman giggled as she showed hers to her date. Table 4. That's near the dance floor. I moved toward the seating chart. A towering mirror framed in brass with names written in soft gold ink. I began at the top, scanning each line. No Lorraine Calloway. I looked again. Maybe they used just first names. Maybe they spelled it wrong. I tried L. Calloway. I checked the corners for overflow tables. Tucked somewhere less visible. Nothing. I walked along the edges of the room, pretending to look for someone, hoping no one would notice what I was really doing. Table after table glowed with candles, place cards, and polished silverware. Every chair filled. Every name accounted for except mine. Tessa was at the head table, laughing beside her new husband. Her father sat to her right. His wife leaned over, touching her arm in a way that seemed rehearsed. I waited for a glance, a nod, anything, but her eyes didn't scan the room. Not once. So I stood near the wall, behind a floral column, watching the celebration unfold like a scene I hadn't been invited into. Not really. The badge burned inside my purse like something earned, not given. People passed by with plates of hors d'oeuvres I wouldn't be offered. I caught sight of a server avoiding eye contact, likely briefed on the non-meal guests. It wasn't a mistake. It wasn't a missed email or last-minute shuffle. It was planned. I let the realization settle without reaction. Then I turned and walked, slowly, toward the gift table at the front of the room, where a plain white envelope waited with my name written in my own hand. The gift table was tucked near the entryway, half shadowed by a floral arrangement that towered higher than the cards beside it. I approached slowly, unsure if I was really going to do what I knew I was about to do. No one was looking. The music from the reception echoed down the hall, joyful, bright, disconnected. I found my envelope immediately, white, unadorned, folded but not sealed. It looked exactly like I felt simple, overlooked, and completely out of place among the satin ribbons and gold-stamped gift bags. I reached for it. My fingers hesitated for a beat. Brushing over the flap, I thought of the signature at the bottom of the check. My handwriting had shaken a little when I signed it this morning. Not because of doubt, because of hope. Hope that this was the last thing I'd ever have to give without asking for anything in return. I opened the envelope. The check was still inside, folded once. I slipped it out, looked at the number, and whispered to no one. Maybe I'm not that important. I tucked the check into my purse, adjusted the strap on my shoulder, and turned toward the exit. No announcements, no scene, just soft steps across polished tile. As I neared the front doors, I heard someone call my name. Mom. I didn't turn. Mom. Wait. The sound of her heels followed me briefly, then stopped. I kept walking. Past the valet, past the fountain, past the buzzing light above the parking lot. My car was cool inside, a small Mercy. I started the engine, pulled away slowly, and didn't look back. They could raise their glasses. They could take their photos. I was done being edited out quietly. At home, I didn't cry. I placed the check on the kitchen counter and poured myself a glass of water. My phone buzzed once. Then again. I turned it face down and sat at the table. The house was quiet. The kind that feels earned. The phone didn't ring that night. No texts. No apologies. I sat at the kitchen table, sipping water that had long gone warm, staring at the blank screen like it might flicker to life if I waited long enough. But nothing came. I opened the group chat, the one labeled Family Thread, and scrolled. The last message I'd sent was a thumbs up emoji the week before when someone suggested matching robes for the bridal party. I'd been trying, laughing at their jokes, offering help where I could, reminding Tessa not to forget her ID for the honeymoon flight. None of it mattered. Without a word, I removed myself from the chat. It didn't feel dramatic. It felt overdue. Later, I stepped out onto the back porch with a blanket wrapped around my shoulders and sat down with a second glass of water. A few sparrows had settled in the oak tree at the far end of the yard. They chirped quietly, shifting branches as the light faded into that heavy blue dusk I've always loved. It wasn't anger I felt, not even sadness, really, just that distinct stillness that comes after something clicks into place. A puzzle piece you've tried to force for years, only to realize it belonged to a different picture altogether. Tessa's words had been casual, breezy, only the important ones in front. She hadn't looked at me when she said it, hadn't thought it would land like a blow, but it did. Not because it was loud, but because it was true, at least in her eyes. For years, I'd confused being useful with being valued. I made things happen. I filled in the gaps. I paid bills, ran errands, offered quiet support without ever asking if anyone thought I belonged in the photo. Now I knew. And in that knowing, the silence didn't ache, it settled, like dust after a long storm. The sparrows flew off when the porch light clicked on. I stayed out a little longer, letting the air cool against my skin. Inside, the check was still on the counter, untouched. I thought of tearing it up, but I didn't. Some things need to sit a while. 3 days passed before I heard the knock. It was mid-morning when I heard it, a soft knock. Not hurried, not hesitant, just there. I didn't rush to answer. I finished rinsing my mug in the sink, dried my hands, and walked to the door slowly. Tessa stood on the porch, arms crossed, face unreadable. She wasn't wearing makeup, which was rare. Her eyes were puffy, but I didn't ask why. "I thought you understood we had to keep it tight," she said. Without a greeting, there wasn't room for everyone. I stepped aside and let her in. She didn't move far past the doorway, just stood there looking around like the house had changed in 3 days. "Tea?" I asked. She shrugged. "Sure." I made it without speaking, just the sounds of water boiling, cups clinking, when I handed hers to her. She didn't say thank you. We sat at the table, just like we used to after her high school recitals, when she'd come home exhausted and full of stories. Except now, there was nothing spilling out of her, just silence. Finally, she asked, "Was it about the check I stirred my tea?" "No." She raised an eyebrow. "It was about the pattern," I said. She leaned back in her chair, eyes narrowing. What pattern? I didn't answer right away. I let the question linger because she knew, somewhere deep down. She already knew. Every big moment, I said. I'm useful in the planning, present in the stress. But when it's time for the photo, the toast, the seat at the table, I'm not there. That's not about budget. Tessa, that's about choice. She opened her mouth, then closed it again. We sat in silence for a while. She finished her tea. I didn't ask if she wanted more. When she stood to leave, she hesitated at the door. "So, what now?" she asked. I looked at her gently. "That depends on you." She nodded once, eyes darting toward the counter where the check still lay. But I didn't offer it. Later that night, my phone buzzed with a message I didn't expect. The message came just after 9. I recognized the name immediately. Natalie, one of Tessa's oldest friends. They met in elementary school and had been close through college, though I hadn't seen her in years. Her text was short. "Hey, I hope this isn't out of line, but I helped with some of the wedding logistics. I thought you should know your name was originally listed at the head table." My stomach tightened. It was removed 2 days before the wedding. Tessa said it was complicated. I thought you had a right to know. I stared at the screen for a long time before responding. Thank you. I wrote back. I didn't ask for more. I didn't need to. The worst part wasn't the removal, it was the timing. 2 days before, after I'd dropped off the final RSVP, after we'd talked about her veil over the phone, and I'd told her how beautiful she was going to look. She knew I was planning to be there. She knew I had paid for her flowers and sent extra money to help cover the dress alterations when she told me she was tight on cash. And even then, she decided I wasn't meant for the front. I sat with that truth. Let it burn through the last excuses I'd been clinging to. It hadn't been a mistake, not a mix-up or an oversight. It had been a decision. Later that night, I moved the check into a drawer, not to hide it, but to put it where things go when they no longer serve the story being told. The next day, her name lit up my screen again. This time, she was asking something else. The text came just after noon. We're postponing the honeymoon. No context, no explanation. Just a shift in plans delivered without punctuation. I let it sit for a while before I responded. I made tea, folded laundry, swept the back steps. By the time I picked up my phone again, my thoughts had settled into one clear sentence. That check wasn't for a trip. It was for recognition you never gave. I didn't expect an immediate reply, but it came anyway. Then what do I have to do? The question stared at me. A white flag tucked in a glowing blue bubble. I thought about all the years I'd anticipated her needs before she voiced them, packed lunches before she asked, paid bills before they arrived, offered support before she admitted she needed it. That was what mothers did, or at least what I thought we were supposed to do. But I was no longer in the business of solving what someone else refused to see. I typed slowly. Carefully. That's not a question I'll answer for you. I hit send and felt something shift small but undeniable. It wasn't about punishing her. I didn't want revenge or guilt or repayment. What I wanted was something I didn't know how to ask for back then. To matter, without needing to prove it. She didn't reply again that day, that night. I lit a candle in the living room and sat with the quiet. I didn't feel triumphant. I felt clear. 2 days later, she asked to meet. I said yes. We met at a small cafe not far from my house. I chose the place because it was quiet and had no emotional history attached to it. No birthdays, no milestones, no memories that could muddy the air. Tessa arrived late, eyes tired, hair pulled back like she'd been too distracted to style it. She hugged me at the entrance. I didn't resist, but I didn't lean in either. We ordered salads. She barely touched hers. After a few minutes of surface conversation, weather, work, the dog, I reached into my purse and pulled out a plain white envelope. I slid it across the table. She looked down at it, then up at me, unsure. It's empty, I said. Her brow furrowed. If this ever holds another check, I continued, it'll come with terms. She said nothing, just waited. Honesty. I said first. No more soft lies masked as kindness. If you don't want me there, say it. But don't smile while cutting me out. She nodded slowly. Inclusion. I added, not for appearances, not when it's convenient. If I'm part of your life, I want to be seen in it. She opened her mouth, but I held up a hand. And acknowledgement. I said finally, not money, not obligation, just truth. That I was there. That I gave, that I mattered. Her eyes filled. She blinked fast and bit her lip. Then the tears came, quietly. I didn't comfort her. I didn't reach across the table. I simply finished my tea. When the check arrived, I paid it. She didn't protest. We walked out together, but not arm in arm. She lingered by her car, unsure. I gave her a soft smile, then turned toward mine. The next morning, something arrived that I didn't expect. It had been nearly a month since that lunch. No follow-up conversation, no questions about the envelope, just space wide and quiet. I spent most of my days outside, weeding, trimming, tending to corners of the yard I'd long neglected. I bought seedlings that would take their time to bloom. Not because I needed the flowers now, but because I was willing to wait. One afternoon, while rinsing my hands at the spigot, my phone buzzed in my pocket. A single message from Tessa. It was a photo. She must have found it while sorting through old boxes. Tessa was 6, standing in her sequined dance recital outfit. Pink tights slightly crooked, shoes scuffed, and behind her, slightly out of focus, was me kneeling, hands smoothing her sash, hair pulled back in a tight bun, eyes only on her. Beneath the image, just one line: "You were always in front." I just didn't see it. I looked at the photo for a while. I remembered that day, how she'd forgotten the final move in her routine and burst into tears backstage. How I held her until she stopped shaking, then clapped louder than anyone when she walked back out. I didn't reply, not because I was angry, because some moments are better left whole. I set the phone down on the patio table and returned to the garden. The sun was softer now, light stretching long across the lawn. I pushed my hands back into the soil, placing the new blooms into freshly turned earth, feeling, for once, like I wasn't waiting on anything to take root, but my own peace. The house behind me was quiet, and I liked it that way.